Hello everyone, welcome to another live video here on the channel. I haven't done one of these in quite a few months, probably since October when I did all of my horror movie watching marathon. I did all the reviews for all the movies I watched that month, and I'm just back here because I think it's an appropriate time to just jump back on here to talk about the late, great Agnes Varda, who recently passed away. She passed away a few days ago, and she is such an icon and a legend in the cinematic world that I thought it was appropriate to kind of pay an homage to her and just talk about her career and things like that. And I have to say that it came as quite a surprise to me because I wasn't aware that she was ill in any way. I didn't know that she had cancer and she was dealing with that. It would have helped had I had seen her last film and most recent film, Faces Places, which delves a little bit into her health concerns and things like that. Actually watched it a few days ago, right after she passed, in honor of her. It is currently streaming on Netflix. So if you haven't seen any of her films or haven't seen that film specifically, definitely go and do so as soon as possible because with Netflix, you never know when they're going to take their movies off. That's the one thing that's kind of precarious about streaming is things come and go, and once they go, they're probably gone forever most of the time. But her career spans all the way back to the 1950s, and it's very interesting to me to kind of look at all of the different aspects that her career has entailed. She has done many, many things in the film world, specifically, obviously, when it comes to directing movies. She's done short films, she's done feature length films, she's done documentaries. And what is interesting is having such an eclectic group of films, you see such a wide range of talent that she had. She had such a different ability to be so fantastic in many different areas. And what is interesting about her films is that I don't think a lot of people are as well versed in her filmography as they are with some of the other French New Wave directors and filmmakers. Typically, when people first get into the French New Wave, they go for what I like to call the big names or the heavy hitters. People like Jean-Luc Godard or Francois Truffaut or Jean-Pierre Melville. They don't go into kind of the more, eclectic group or kind of the more names that don't get such a big shine in the cinematic world. And Agnes Varda was probably as important as any of those big names. She is someone who is very much a founding mother of the French New Wave, a very important, film movement that came about in the 1960s that has had many influences on filmmakers for decades afterward, of course. If you're curious where you can find a lot of Agnes Varda's films, they're not as easy as one would hope they are to find. Typically, you can find many of them on DVD. Some places they are streaming. Typically, this streaming service called Canopy, which I believe is free for you to subscribe to. Also, I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot of her films on the upcoming Criterion Channel streaming service that is going to be launching very, very soon in its official capacity. I believe April 8th. Don't quote me on that. So it's about a week or so away, and I really can't wait to see what they're going to offer. I hear it is going to be quite a large amount of films, very similar to what they offered on the now defunct, unfortunately, Filmstruck streaming service that has been going now since last November. And I'm hoping we're going to get even more than what's on that. That's my hope. The more movies, the better. That's been my motto now for years. But a lot of her films, like I said, are on DVD. Some are through Criterion, some not. So those you kind of have to really dive into to try to find. Hopefully, now that unfortunately, now that she's passed, we're going to see a lot more of her films become readily available. I've seen a lot of her early work. La Pointe Cour is her first film. It's very documentary-esque style film. It's really fantastic. I would definitely recommend people to start as early on as you can with Agnes Varda because you get to see her, great progression as a filmmaker and as an artist in her work, where she's, first off, just kind of experimenting with new and interesting ways in order to film things. Very documentary as style, almost cinema verite type style. Another film that I've seen from her is Cleo from 5 to 7, one of her more, I would say, well known films. And that film is absolutely fantastic. It's available on DVD right now. And I believe it's also going to be available on Blu ray through Criterion relatively soon. I'm just going to double check on that because I don't want to, bring out any misinformation. And this film came in 60. And yes, there's currently just a DVD. I really hope that gets a Blu-ray release eventually. Another of her films that I've seen is Le Bonheur, which is a very, very interesting film that deals with family and tragedy and certain aspects in that regard. It's a really fantastic film. I highly recommend people checking that one out as well. When it comes to other films I've seen from her, I've seen actually several films I have here in this Eclipse set from Criteria. This is Eclipse series set number 43. If you can see that here. This is a set that came out a couple of years ago, and I picked it up right when it came out. I couldn't wait to get it. Actually, I think I bought it at the Barnes and Noble Criterion sale that year, but it came out, relatively close to when that occurred. And this set here contains four of her films, two documentaries, um, and I believe two feature films or something like that. I know definitely. Actually, no. This contains five films. I'm sorry. One, two, three, four, five. Yes, if I can count, that would be fantastic. First up is Uncle Yanko, which I know is a documentary. I've seen it. There's a Black Panthers documentary, and that's of course the political group that was very active back in the 1960s during the civil rights movement and things like that. They're still around today. They're still active today as well. The third one here is Lions, Love, and Lies. This is a feature length film. This has a hundred, this has an yeah, it has a 112-minute running time. This came out in 1969. The next one is Murmures, which came out in 1980, which is has an 82-minute runtime, came out in 1980, and the last one is Documentaire, which has a 65-minute runtime. These are all in French, with, of course, English subtitles for those of you who aren't fluent in French. It's a very interesting, eclectic group of films that she has here, and these were films that she made while she was living in California. These are not films that she made over in France. But another film that I've seen from her, which I think may be her best film, and I'm just saying that based off of the films that I've currently seen and from what I've heard from people, and that is Vagabond. This film came out in 1985, and what an absolutely interesting, fantastic film that centers around a young woman who is a vagabond. She is just traveling and surviving, and you really don't get the sense of why she's doing it. She's almost doing it for the sake of doing it, and it's just very interesting to see her journey as a person and to see where she ultimately ends up. We kind of get a glimpse right off the bat, right in the first frame or scene of the movie where she ends up, but it's interesting to see that journey of how you get there. It's kind of framed in that way where we see the end at the beginning and then we see the rest of the story, and then it ends at the beginning as well. It's very, very interesting, very fantastic film. Faces Places is, of course, her most recent and last film, like I mentioned before, and it is an absolutely just brilliantly gorgeous, introspective, extrospective, if extrospective is a word, not quite sure. And it's just really interesting to see the dynamic between her and JR, who is this photographer, this photographic artist, and them just traveling around the French countryside, just talking with different people, posting these giant pasting these giant pictures up on barn houses or at docking bays and things like that, and really seeing just this journey of these two people and what they have in common, what they don't have in common, and just seeing Agnes Varda interact with people is a delight in and of itself. She was someone who was very personable, seemingly, who was also very full of life and very jovial when this film was made, and I believe that that seemed to be her, demeanor throughout her life. If you're not familiar with, a little backstory on Agnes Varda, she was married to Jacques Demy, who was another famous French New Wave director, filmmaker. They were married, I believe, from 1950s or 60s all the way up until his death in the late 80s, and he was someone who made some of the most interesting and very um, talked about films. I actually have the Jacques Demy box set from Criterion right here, coincidentally. I have this here. He, of course, did films like The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, The Young Girls of Rochefort, Donkey Skin, Une Chambre en Ville, A Bay of Angels, Lola. And what is interesting is that Agnes Varda worked with him on all of these films. She was very heavily involved. I believe she wrote the main song that is sung by the character of Lola in Lola. And it's very, very interesting how closely involved she was in many different things and how closely all of the French New Wave directors kind of knew each other, worked with each other. Some of them worked with the same actors and same people, cinematographers and all that kind of stuff. And it was very interesting to see n- who is left from that era as well. With Agnes Varda passing, the main figurehead of that era is Jean-Luc Godard, who many people don't really like. I have to say I like his early work, Breathless, Vive sa vie, A Band Apart, all of those films from that, early 60s to mid 60s era was really what he became famous for. A lot of people aren't big fans of his later work or more recent work or are fans of him as a person in general. Apparently, he is not the nicest of individuals. There's a scene in Faces Places towards the end where he does something that is, that hurts Agnes Varda in a very personal way, and it's not very nice. To be that vindictive at that age. At some point you have to, grow up or be mature or something like that. You can't take all of your emotional baggage with you throughout your life and all those things. But that's a different story for a different time. But yeah, it's really, really sad to see one of the titans and one of the legends pass away, as we are seeing happening so frequently now within the last few years. So many people that we've come to know in the film world have indeed passed away, and sadly, that's just going to be the case even more so going forward because that's just the way things are. People get old, people get sick, people pass away, whether it is, in the artist world with cinema or music or whatever, or even when it's in our own personal lives. We all have to experience loss, and that's just a part of life. And sadly, those of us who are left are have to move on and go on with our own lives and things like that. But when it comes to artists like Agnes Varda, and filmmakers and musicians and all that kind of stuff, their work lives on. Their legacy is here. We can enjoy all of their lives because they've left such an interesting footprint while they were here. So that has just been my kind of brief, look at a little my brief thoughts about Agnes Varda and her passing and all of the things like that. If you like this channel, please check out the other videos that I've done. I've done various movie reviews and Blu-ray reviews and all of those things. I'm going to think about doing a lot more of these kind of, pseudo live videos just so I can get more content up quickly. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.